Hello and welcome to the webinar, How COVID-19 Crisis Impacted Innovation in Corporations. We are very pleased to have you here with us. So as I see people are still joining in, let's go to a few housekeeping notes before we start. So please feel free to ask questions all along the webinar. You can use the chat or Q&A box. We will address them all throughout the webinar. And the second thing I want to share with you is I'm inviting you to join the funnel channel on Slack. So add me to the channel on the chat box or send us a private message and we will send you an invitation link. So I think we can start. So as we all know, COVID-19 has impacted all the world and many industries. We created this webinar to share with you case studies from corporations from Israeli ecosystem, from the Brazilian and the Costa Rica one, along with corporations' immunity tools, which are very essential in these days and age. This webinar is brought to you by the Funnel Global Corporate Innovation Magazine and Community. I am Liron Glickman, the Funnel Director and the Global Business Development Specialist owner at the Human Factor firm. The speakers that are going to share their smarts and experience today with you are actually the Funnel Global partners in Israel. We have Duku Innovation Ecosystem Design. In Brazil, Kivo Design Trivial Innovation, and Costa Rica, we have Stratos Group, all catering innovation in corporations in their countries. Now, as you know, corporations have been going through an innovation and digital transformation in the past years. Obviously, COVID-19 have accelerated the needs for innovative solutions. So the funnel was born actually to provide the world's corporate management with cutting-edge tools, knowledge, and best practices to innovate and grow. We do it through a quarterly magazine spread by 3 ecosystems and online and offline events. We are geared to help you deliver impact in your organization. So whether you work in strategy, R&D, HR, marketing, design, technology, innovation, or even a new venture. So members of the funnel community have access to peers that are positions in innovation-related roles in some of the most respected companies in Israel and around the world. To stay updated with our articles, case studies, and tools, we invite you to join our Slack channel, community, the funnel channel. Just again, send us a message, add me to the channel on the chat box, and we will send you a personalized invitation link. So I wanted to see a bit about our community. We have online and offline events, as you can see, in different countries. And of course, we invite you to be with us. Another thing is important to know that at the end of the webinar, we will launch the Costa Rica magazine. So you can bring a glass of wine, we will have one, and we'll toast to their launch and success. So allow me to introduce our speakers for today. We have Achi Gvirtman, the CPO at Duku Innovation Design Israel. We have Hilton Menezes, CEO at Kivo Brazil, and Luis Carlos Berquero, the founder at Stratos Group Costa Rica, and myself, Liron Glickman. We are going to start with Achi Gvirtman, who is going to give us a very important speech around corporate immunity. And after that, we'll also learn more about some Israeli ecosystem insights from him. So Achi, please start.
Thank you, Liron. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. We're going to talk about organizational immunity today, and I want to start with a short analogy. We're all going through the global pandemic, and everybody now is very well familiar with these exponential graphs. We know now that the tragic thing about a pandemic is that by the time we realize we have a problem, it is already too late to stop it. And when we look at these graphs of the cumulative coronavirus deaths, that is so tragic, we can see that it's a matter of a few days from the moment that we realize that something really bad is happening until it's too late to do anything about it, because the disaster is already taking place. And this short time period really doesn't allow us to take the necessary steps. And so the countries, the nations that were able to flatten the curves are the ones that took the drastic measures before that they could notice that something bad was happening. It was a preventive measure. And so this graph over here now may look familiar to you, but it is a graph that has nothing to do with the coronavirus pandemic. This graph is actually the revenues of Netflix between the years 1999 and 2013. And it's very interesting because the story of Netflix is that in the year 2000, they offered a Blockbuster, which was the dominant force in that market at the time, to acquire them for $50 million, and they were refused. By 2010, Blockbuster went bankrupt. And the interesting thing here is that the point in time where Blockbuster could feel what Netflix was doing in their profit and loss statements was probably around 2006, when Netflix went through $1 billion in revenues. And at the time, Blockbuster had about $6 billion in revenues. But as in pandemics, by the time Blockbuster realized that Netflix was a problem, it was too late to do anything about it. And 4 years later, they went bankrupt. It was too late. So the tragic thing about a business disruption is that by the time we realize we have a problem, it is already too late to stop it. And the question is, what can we do as companies, as managers in companies, executives, to make better decisions, to identify the approaching disruption, to somehow immune our organizations from such disruptions and be able to make better decisions and handle them in time. Because the problem is that what takes 4 days in the real world of pandemics is about 4 years in the business world. And because companies take so much time to respond and react and take action, 4 years in business time is like 4 days or 4 weeks in pandemic time. So if you don't realize that you're being disrupted a few years before you actually hit the crisis point, then you really are going to be in trouble because you won't have enough time to do anything about it. So as I said, my name is Achi Wirtzman. I was a VP of Innovation for the global division, software division of HP. In the last 2 years, I joined as a co-founder of Duco, Innovation Ecosystem Design. And what we do is we help corporations around the world of any type. Can be business corporations, it can be financial, it can be government companies, and can be municipalities and so on, to become innovative and reach a state of what we call innovation proficiency. And the question is, how can we introduce an immune system to the organization that will identify threats and opportunities on time and deal with them effectively? So in order to talk about immunization, let's look at the immunization system of the human body. So we have what is called dendritic cells, and the dendritic cells identify an intruder, which in this case is a virus, and they alert something that is called the T cells. And once the dendritic cells alert the T cells seek and destroy the virus. And from that moment on, there is a memory in the body within the dendritic cells that can identify the virus if it appears again. So the system has memory. Vaccines work in a way that simulates the virus. So again, the dendritic cells recognize vaccine material, which mimics the virus. They inform the T cells, which seek to destroy the intrusion, and then they keep a record of the virus. And that way, the system actually learns and improves over time based on practice. So it's important to understand that this amazing system, think about all the threats that it protects the human body from. The amazing capability of the immune system to keep us safe, to keep our bodies healthy. And it is a complex system. It's not centrally controlled. We have a tendency as humans to look at things and think that there is some central control panel where everything is being run and managed. But the immune system is actually a complex system. It has many pieces that work together through intricate relationships between them and the exchange of data and information. And so once we realize that the immune system is a complex system, the purpose of what we do at Duco is to look for ways of creating parallel systems, but inside corporations. So let's see how organizational entrepreneurship works. So we have the entrepreneur, and the entrepreneur can identify potential threat or an opportunity. And once they identify it, it alerts the supporting network within the organization. The supporting network consists of innovation champions and professional experts, and it seeks to leverage the opportunity or attack the potential threat. And as a network, the organization becomes something that has institutional memory. Because if you keep doing this again and again, and you have thousands of employees, and you encourage them to repeatedly identify potential threats or opportunities and act on it using a supporting network of champions and experts, then the more we do it, the tighter the network becomes. We accumulate institutional memory. We can identify new business models, new technologies that we can leverage properly. And we develop a VC-like approach to decision-making. And so what happens is that our own organizational entrepreneurship activities take the form of a complex system that's being executed. It's something that we call an innovation ecosystem, an internal innovation ecosystem that basically becomes an institutional memory de facto for the organization and actually is able to execute better over the course of time and handle potential threats or leverage potential opportunities. And you have to understand that the organizational immunity that we're seeking is basically employee-driven entrepreneurship that is run as a complex system, the way that I described it earlier. And if we break it down, it basically consists of an entrepreneurial process where we challenge our workforce to identify disruptive threats and opportunities. We teach them how to formulate their observations into potential business impact. We allow them to act, collect the available data to validate the observations. We encourage them and give them the conditions to follow through, to invest in a cost-effective experiment and bring them to success. If we do enough of these, then just like an accelerator, we will have enough of the opportunities and threats that we can actually act on at scale and show overall success for the organization. There's a supporting network that feeds this process. It is not a structured process that is centrally controlled. We allow entrepreneurs, champions, and experts to act relatively freely within this process under clearly defined guidelines, of course, because it has to work in parallel to the existing organization, but it is something that functions as a complex system. And we have to understand that just like the immunization, the immune system acts in parallel to the digestion system, breathing, blood circulation, and coordinates with them to a certain degree, but is always on and always working systematically in the same way. If we want to achieve corporate immunity from disruption, then we need our entrepreneurship system, the complex system, to constantly be active and coordinating in parallel to the finance, to marketing, to sales, and so on. It is not disrupting the organization. It is working in coordination with other departments and in sync with them. And through that, it protects the organization and allows it to continue growing. And for us, the time to act is now, to build immunization, to invite the workforce to serve as entrepreneurs, champions, and experts, and constant systematic action, because that is what will prepare you for your own industry virus. It's important to build this immunization, and it will happen through a complex system of corporate entrepreneurship. Before I talk about specific cases that we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic and how corporations responded to it based on their various states that they were in during the pandemic, I'll pause for a second, Liron, if there's any questions in the chat room.
Thank you. Not at the moment, but we definitely invite you to ask your questions. Okay,
so I'll continue and I'll pause again at the end for questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them up in the chat room. So how did companies respond to the crisis? So the way that I like to look at it is it really depends on where those companies were in terms of their innovation proficiency. So you can see on the left-hand side, this is like an upside down parable. It's like a hump that organizations need to get over. And you can see there are three main parts. On the left, where there's no innovation investment when the crisis hit. In the middle, companies that are doing sporadic innovation. And on the right-hand side, companies that are doing systematic innovation. And in the middle part, there are two segments. On the left, lack of clear opportunities. So companies that were doing sporadic innovation, but were not very successful doing so because they didn't identify clear opportunities to act. And companies on the right side that did have clear opportunities, but did not act on them. usually because it's the sort of thing that, just like in our personal lives, we know that we should exercise, that we should eat properly, that we should sleep enough hours every night, but we don't act on it. We don't feel like it's a must. So companies that did sporadic innovation had clear opportunities, but never got the chance to act on it because they didn't feel like it was a must. So when the COVID crisis struck, we could see really typical behavior from these companies, because the ones that had no innovation investment simply focused on reacting to the crisis. So, if it's an insurance company, we saw them focusing more on continuing to serve the customers, to take their help desk and make sure that they're working within the regulations of the COVID-19 that were issued by the health ministry, not to disrupt the service. It was a very defensive response. There was really no innovation happening. It was just keep the lights on, just make sure that we don't disrupt the service and that we continue to do what we do. The companies that did sporadic innovation but did not have clear opportunities, what they did was basically to cut innovation investment. We saw plans that were canceled. We saw a lot of messages from people who we knew that were innovation managers that were starting, either were at home not working, or were looking for new jobs, which was very sad to us as we are part of the community. But we could sense that companies that did not have clear opportunities to innovate, even though they did some sporadic investing, they just cut it. And it's very easy to cut innovation because innovation is a long-term investment. It's very difficult to see its contribution in the short term unless you're doing it systematically. Another example is a company that was selling wholesale products. They were selling it to businesses. And when the COVID-19 struck, those businesses were closed. So they needed a way to get directly to their consumers. And they knew for many, many months that they should create a website where consumers could purchase their products directly. They knew that they should do it, but it wasn't a must. What the COVID-19 crisis did was it turned their should into a must. And they realized that something that they were postponing, and as Americans say, they were kicking the can down the road, suddenly, magically, they were able to do it within a few days. Something that seemed like it was an insurmountable challenge, within a few days, they were able to set up a web presence and start selling their products directly. And the good news is that companies that were doing systematic innovation, not only was it not disrupted, some of them actually developed a higher commitment because they realized that this was working for them. They realized from experience that this was something that was creating opportunities for them. And some of them leveraged their systematic approach to innovation to actually ask their workforce, what can we do about COVID-19? How can we leverage the COVID-19 crisis in order to generate more value to our customers? And we saw this with more than one global corporation that was doing it. And so it really is really depends on the momentum that you're in. It just pushes you more in the direction that you started going when a crisis hits. And that is why it's so important to invest in this immunity during the good times, because if you don't, then when the bad times come, you're not ready and you don't know how to leverage innovation. So it's all about practice. So I mentioned turning your shoulds into must. So my message is that you should look at this as a must, right? So build organizational immunity like it's Blockbuster in 2003, before it's too late. You must turn your shoulds into musts. You know that you should invest in innovation. You have to look at it from this standpoint. Maybe your Netflix, the Netflix of your industry, is creeping up on you and you don't know that it's happening. You're not even aware. And unless you start developing corporate immunity through the complex system of entrepreneurship that I mentioned, you will not even know that a disruption is coming up. And even if you do, it will probably be too late to do something about it. So you must build this capability. You must build this skill within your organization before it's too late. So that's what I wanted to talk about. It was relatively short. I hope it was clear enough. Feel free to contact me if you're interested. You can find me on LinkedIn. If you read Hebrew, then you can read my blog and you can see our website and the book that I wrote about organizational innovation. So thank you very much. Liron, any questions in the chat?
Yes, I have actually questions. First of all, thank you very much. Everything you said is obviously very important for any corporate to understand how to develop immunity, if not before crisis, then right now. I do want to address different industries. So obviously you gave example as Blockbuster, which we know what happened to them. But if we look at today's space, then we have what they call winners and losers. You know, some industries that are thriving right now, and some others like tourism and hotels and flights that don't. So do you have any points that could be, any tips for different industries that you can mention now, a few?
So I cannot really point to any specific industries and provide magical solutions. I think it's like an overarching principle. When you look at the current situation, what are you doing? Are you just being defensive? Are you just trying to prevent a demise of your industry that is probably approaching? Or are you being proactive? So for example, here in Israel, we saw some hotels that realized that guests were not coming, the tourists were not coming. So they turned their apartments into short-term flats, right? So people who were renting apartments in Tel Aviv were able to go to hotels and rent the rooms and get a cleanup service, etc. So this could become a business in the long term if it's something that is sustainable. But again, the question is, are you just trying to prevent your demise, or are you seeking for new and creative ways to create your future avenues of growth? And sorry for repeating the point, being able to do such a thing is something that is a skill that organizations should build. And so if, assuming that you're in an industry right now that as a whole is not in disruption, and because if you weren't ready by now, it might be too late. But if you're in an industry that has not yet been severely disrupted by COVID-19, what is your disruptor? Who is going to be your virus? What is going to be your industry's metaphoric virus? And you must learn from this experience and realize that when you turn your shoulds into musts, then your organization can do amazing things. It's just a question of perception. You have to build this skill and force your organization to actually take these difficult steps.
Thank you very much. We're going to go back later on to hear a bit about Israel from you as well. But I want to turn now to Costa Rica, please, to Luis Carlos, if you could please share a bit about your ecosystem and how you've been dealing corporations in the COVID-19 crisis.
Yeah, listen to Ahi. I think that the most I grabbed what Ahi mentioned. People understood that the adaptation or change was not a must. Was not it became a must, and the ways that I see it with my clients and colleagues is that COVID-19 was a crash course in innovation. Actually, the market and the consumer change and the way you need to serve them changed completely. Not only because the habits adapted from the consumer, but also the regulators changed the rules of the game. Some industries had to shut down, and some others needed to be able to operate on a lower density, on a lower with less resources because of the people that couldn't get into the companies. So what I have talked a lot with them is that the challenges were very clear: new distribution channels, flexible supply chains from one week to another. The rules change, so they have to adapt on a constant basis. And very quickly, they needed to change the way they saw it change. But what was different? Why they were so successful on doing some changes and doing innovation without even knowing it? I think that I have three things that I have defined with them that are different. One, incentive was big enough to move away from the comfort zone, and it became a must to do things differently. This decision process was differently, so it was quicker than before. Why? Because they were thinking about short-term initiatives rather than a permanent change. And as Ahi mentioned, innovation is all about experimentation and about trying new things on a lower scale with less risk and less investment, and understanding what works and adapting it into in what worked, implemented in the business units. So the process was different. The mind was different because they thought they were investing or they were making decisions just for the short term, just for COVID, instead of changing the business for good. And the third one was that the risk was lower and the investment were lower, because in their mind, they were investing and they were making decisions just for a few weeks or a few months rather than changing for good. So by de-risking the process and trying several things because they didn't have a clear understanding of what worked, they created hypotheses, they created experiments, they tried things, and they now understood what worked and what didn't, and they are talking about the new normal. Because I see that on the other side of a few weeks on the process, they understood that certain things that they were doing, they actually are very good for the business. So now they're thinking how to adapt them on a permanent basis. So without even knowing, a lot of the companies within our region started doing innovation or increased their innovation activities based on a pandemic, based on what was happening, just because the circumstances and the context changed, and that facilitated the process. Now the challenge is how to implement that method, and that how to institutionalize and how to create the culture that on a permanent basis you can actually run these experiments and do it as a coordinating process within the other processes of the business. So I can share a few cases, but at the end, what I have seen, or what we have seen here in the region, is that what usually would be what before was rejected by the immune system of the organizations is changing, and I think this was an opportunity to open the opportunities for the companies to actually work and institutionalize innovation practices, because they had a forced run on the innovation based on COVID that showed them that there's a different way of doing things and adapting new processes and new ways of doing, and that innovation is not invention, it's about constant improvement on the ways the business are run. And on a conclusion is that the more experiments they run, there's a higher chance of moving faster, being more agile and more resilient towards the business environment, and therefore avoiding the trap that we have seen in many stories, such as the one of Netflix and Blockbuster that Ahi shared. So in a very short time, that's what I can share of what happened here, and how companies adapted, and how they actually reframe everything in the decision process and the experimentation process of dealing with threats and new opportunities or new challenges in the environment.
Thank you. Yeah. Luis Carlos, sorry, were you about to say more? Another?
No. Actually, I think that we don't have a lot of time, so I would like to allow enough time for the other people to share their stories as well.
Sure. So we'll do that. Before that, we'll just have a question. How have other corporations in Central America handled the crisis? Is there any collaboration among corporations in Central America on how to handle the COVID-19 crisis?
Yes, I have seen a lot of collaboration especially from the innovation leaders, the technology leaders, because they had to adapt a lot on how to support the business, the new businesses. And that's not a core activity for most of the companies. For example, retailers, that's one example I have. Retailers have gathered to understand what have been the best practices to adapt their supply chain, and what technology to use, what are the better vendors, what has worked, what hasn't, and people are been talking are more open about sharing experiences and about understanding that peer-to-peer learning is critical in order to adapt faster and learn faster than before.
For sure. You know, I call it growth spurt, like for babies. You know, the world has to just, make this leap and just really learn fast, as you say. So thank you for sharing that. So from Costa Rica, we're now moving to Brazil, to Hilton. Unfortunately, it seems like Brazil, also South America, have also suffered a severe pandemic than I would say other places around the world. So again, health wishes to everybody, but I wonder also how this has affected the ecosystem. So I'm waiting to hear from you.
Thanks, Liron. Thanks for your supporting words about the crisis in Brazil. Yes, we're in the center of the pandemic. We are a really big continental country, so we've been suffering some struggles in here. But what I want to say is that Kivu, in the last few years, have helping corporate environments to adhere to the culture of innovation, helping them to create new internal structures, open up partnerships with the startups, and to implement new work processes or new work models. This we've been doing to help them to become more agile and flexible for the demand of consumers and to be the competitors, of course. But what happened when we design a model to create new products and services, new businesses, and then in this moment of certain stability, and suddenly what happened is a pandemic and an economic crisis. So people start asking, what are we going to do now? So I want to share with you my screen, because there is an internet meme that I like a lot, saying that what happened when you're in your company that took you to just one sec, took you to accelerate your digital transformation process. So it's loading here. It's okay? Can you see it? Okay. So the question is, then COVID-19 happened, and who led the digital transformation in your company? So the answer is the COVID-19, because there was no CEO prepared, and there was no CTO or CMO or on company ready for this kind of stress. So here in Brazil, we had sensitive sectors, economic sectors, they were impacted retail, for very impact, of course, consumer goods, and utilities. But even though if we have large businesses, groups in Brazil with billions of revenue, the surprising part is that part of its operations were done manually or even on offline, with offline process. So what we've been seeing in the last few weeks, we have the number in Brazil of COVID is still rising up. The flattening of the curve is not yet seen in the short term. So there's a lot of business being forced to change rapidly. And the size of the transformation is not certain, is uncertain, especially in a continent country like ours. But we've seen a significant growth in two consumer markets. People over 50, which is the main country, and the CDE classes, which together they represent a little more than half of the purchasing power of Brazilians. And I have to say, Brazilian population have at least one smartphone. So we have those two conditions happening. And what we've been seeing is that the innovation department of large companies or larger organizations has become truly strategic. Now they're getting power to be the leader of the really real transformation in companies. And I brought here 3 cases that I wanted to share with you. The first one, I have to say, those cases will be in the next The Funnel magazine, the Brazil edition. So we've been talking to a lot of companies, understanding how they've been innovating or how they've been treating the business during this pandemic crisis. So the first group that I bring to you is a huge Brazilian multinational food company called the BRF Group. And I just choose 3 actions of what the innovation team has done to work on in this moment of crisis. So they adapt their working, I have to say, suddenly we have some kids interference, if you don't mind. My kids is all around me. I'm at my place. So
that's a part of the COVID-19 effect, working from home.
Exactly. So first of all, they have to adapt the process using online tools like Mural. I've talked to a lot of teams. They go in straight forward online. They've adapted the time of their meetings. They've adapted the time, the duration of online and offline activities. So this is really important because there's a perception here in Brazil that it's really good to work online. And we have a statistic say that almost 70% of services and some specific markets, they're not thinking on going back to how it was in the past. They're thinking to adopt, or even half of the time, home office, or even full-time home office. So another action was that they're searching for a solution that help boost the post-pandemic food services businesses. That means all the companies that we've been talking, they're putting more effort in the open innovation activities. And they're creating new process for conducting product tests with the customers, with consumers before launching it. So basically there's 3 actions that I choose to bring to you as an example of what innovation team has done in this big group. Another group that I bring the case in is Carrefour. Carrefour is a French multinational corporation specializing in retail with large operations in Brazil as well. So the innovation teams has worked very close to the business and sales department. So they've integrated the system to help in monitoring sales and creating digital assistants on WhatsApp. I've seen some retail brick and mortar businesses using a lot of strategy on the social network and WhatsApp and so forth to leverage the sales. So they've been, again, partnering with startups focused on last mile delivery. That means more open innovation activities and one-line process to hire 5,000 new temporary employees. So they've structured a fully online process for hiring people. That's what Carrefour Group are doing. And the last one, it's Enel Group. It's an Italian multinational energy company, again, with large operations in Brazil. So they're basically using 3 strategies as well. They've created squads with innovation department plus business departments to work on the crisis. And they've adopted a methodology called creative problem solving plus using online tools to collect the challenges and to think about how to deal with it and bring with the solutions. So they had 20 challenges mapped, and they've came up with 16 solutions proposed within this group. They created open innovation, actually open innovability portal for employees' suggestion, and they start doing startup scouting to solve their problems with startup and using the open innovation ecosystem as well. So those 3 cases, I wanted to share what strategies or actions they've been doing to tackle this COVID economic crisis. And on Kivo, we've at the same time created what we've been calling Kivo Future Thinking. That's a 3-day online workshop helping companies to create a tactical action plans for the next 3 months. But we look for the next 3 months focused on the customer behavior for the next 3 years. So it's an exercise going forward to the next customer behavior for the next 3 years and creating a tactical plan for the next 3 months. This is what I've been doing to help companies to go through this very tough moment. If you want to ask us more info about it, I pleased to invite you to join our Slack community, the funnel Slack community. It's open. If you need the link, the invite, please send us here your email. Then we'll be pleased to send you the link to join the Slack community. And if you want to go in contact with me directly, please find me on LinkedIn. You have my QR code here to add me just now if you want to. But you just look for the slogan, no bullshit innovation. Your experiences.
Great.
Okay, that's what I wanted to share with you guys. I'm very thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Hilton, for giving us these insights. And as you said, these will also appear in an article in the upcoming The Funnel magazine of you in Brazil. I want to go back to you, Achi, if you can share a few words about the Israeli ecosystem and how it has coped with the COVID-19 crisis.
So, as I said before, I think we can categorize it into the 4 types that I shared. That have to do with the state that they were at before the crisis hit. I think that that people talk about the Israeli spirit, and I think that it was very clear to us that companies in Israel were just trying everything they could to get themselves out of this situation. In general, you could see a lot of companies changing their model of service, upgrading existing services in order to adapt the situation that occurred. And I have to say that the biggest takeaway that I had from this situation did come from what I mentioned earlier. When you get to a point where you realize that something that you've been postponing for a long time, where you knew that you should do it, and the situation occurred where it became a must, suddenly, somehow, you were able to find the resources that you could never allocate. You were able to prioritize something that would always go under the red line. And I think that the biggest lesson to us is, why not take that approach and keep it when we go back to the new normal? Because if we look at the economic forecasts, if we look at what some economists are saying about the next few years, where they're seeing parallels between what we're going through right now and the Great Depression that started in 1929, you can see that there's going to be a lot of ebbs and flows in the business cycle during the next few years. We don't really know what's going to happen. There's going to be a lot of changes, and things are going to rapidly change. And even this new normal that we talk about, there's going to be a new normal and a new normal. So the thing is that as organizations, now we have to prepare. Hilton and Lewis talked about flexibility, this ability to handle the unexpected. It's a skill. You have to develop that skill as an organization, so that when you do realize that something is a should, and the should is a should plus, you turn it into a must, and you just do it. I think that's the biggest takeaway. And I had to say that some of the things that I've seen were really inspiring. You could see companies that were really doing, some of them were not big companies, that were really making an effort to either survive or even thrive through the crisis.
Thank you very much, Achi. So we actually have a question for all three of you. How corporation in any of the countries encourage and motivated employees in those times? It makes sense, though employees, some of them or most of them were working from home. So it's interesting to know was there any special, any special attitude towards employees at home to help the corporate going?
So guys, I was talking a lot today, so I will let you answer first.
Well, in our region, I have not seen specific incentives towards people, but a lot of actions towards making it easier for them in the transitions to work from home. Obviously, the government has allowed certain measures to reduce the hours and flexible working hours and things that were not possible before. But corporations have been, their main focus have been how to make it more comfortable for them and more effective to work from home, rather than give them specific incentives for them. That's what is happening here in our region. I don't know the other people what have seen.
Ron, what's the question, please?
The question was how corporations dealt with employees working from home, being, the important force that helps them moving forward. If there was anything you can share about helping their employees working from home, and obviously help innovate and all that when the teams are remote.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of actions here in Brazil, especially because we're a very, how can I say in English?
Say in Portuguese.
We like to mingle. We like to be like in a group working and going to have lunch, dinner together. And suddenly when that happened, when we have to install ourselves in quarantine, people felt it as deep as we've seen companies worried about their state of mind, with worried about their health, and on actions that we've seen, and have adopted some, is to help them to have a great work environment, you know, providing chairs, providing tables, providing some specific working needs. We've seen a lot of groups working on mental health as well. HR companies are hiring professionals to talk to their employees and to discuss on how to deal with this moment that you're totally or alone or with your family or with a couple of people that you're living with. So how do you establish a routine? How do you establish a moment for work, a moment for leisure, a moment for family, a moment for doing what it needs to be done to have a healthy life? Especially us, we've been with group of 40, but I've seen companies with group of 15,000 people doing basically the same actions.
Okay, thank you. So in respect of time, Achi, if you could please give a short and sweet answer as well.
So basically, I have to chime in on what my colleagues said. You know, there were various means of keeping people engaged. I have to say, sorry for being so single-minded, but it was part of keeping employees motivated. We did have a customer that did like an innovation cycle for the employees that were at home as a way of keeping some very talented employees engaged and promoting innovative opportunities. This immune system that I talked about has many aspects to it. The HR aspect, positive HR aspect, is also very powerful, although it's not the main purpose of running something like that. But in this case, it did contribute to that as well.
Exactly. It's a good point what you're saying. So basically also the allowing or working on innovating, more adapting the innovation to the current situation also keeps employees more motivated. They feel they're more, the work has more meaning to help the company overcome the crisis and so on.
Yeah.
So before we end, we have just a few more minutes. So we're going to do two things. First of all, I would like to have a quick sentence from you, summary of this, of your point of view. So a quick summary, and then we're going to, as promised, to raise a toast for launching the Costa Rica, the Funnel magazine. We have one in Israel, we have one in Brazil. So please, Luis, let's start with you. If you can have a short summary, please, for your part.
I would, or at least what I would like to share now, it's rather than a summary, I would like to send out a message that would be, please learn from this experience and try to make it on a permanent basis, because we have seen a lot of good outcomes out of this crisis or new normal. So please learn and don't forget that there's a different way of doing things.
Thank you. Hilton?
Yes, my tagline is that keep calm, this will pass. Try to learn, as Luis said, try to learn the best of this experience. It's a unique experience. We've never been through it. And especially think about people, not only your business, but how to deal with this new behavior and consuming behavior. That's my message. Thank you.
Thank you. And Achi?
So I used a lot of metaphors today, so I'll finish with a quick story. So two frogs fall into a large pot filled with cream, and the frogs do not know how to swim, and they try to jump out of the pot, but they're not able to because the edges of the pot, the sides of the pot inside are very smooth and slippery. So one of them basically gives up and drowns, and the other ones continue to hectically hit with its fins on the cream and churn the cream until some of it turned into a piece of butter, and it was able to climb on the butter and jump out of the pot. And I think that what we learned from this crisis is, what sort of frog are you? If you're an executive, what sort of company are you running? Are you a company that's going to drown in the cream, or are you going to churn it into a piece of butter and jump out? And you have to remember that you experience the crisis on a very short time scale. But you have to remember that you are in constant crisis. In this day and age with technology that is rapidly changing and advancing, the disruptor of your industry is coming. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So you have to move, to shift to crisis mode. And I like to say, when people ask me how I was doing during that crisis, I said, I'm churning the cream. So that's my message to you.
I love your stories, and thank you for sharing this one as well. Before we finish, first of all, I want to say thank you to Merav Lapidus. She's with us. She's actually helping us with the back office, and she's a part of our team. So thank you so much for being here and for your help. And guys, if you're at home, and of course, my fellow panelists, I don't know if you can see it, it's my wine, yeah. So congratulations, Luis, Carlos. Thank you, everybody. And cheers to the final Costa Rica.
Cheers.
Cheers. Good luck.
Cheers. L'chaim.
Lots of success, L'chaim.
L'chaim.
How do you say it in Spanish? I'm sorry.
Salud.
Salud, of course. Salud. Fantastic. So thank you everybody again for being with us. You feel free to approach us again here. We'll be happy to invite you again to the funnel community, the funnel channel on Slack, where you'll be able to meet peers, discuss, get more information, and get to be the first to be updated about what's happening in the corporate innovation world. We're looking forward to having you with us in any of our other activities, and wishing you all the best and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.